Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me Les Best. Les, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Tom. It's wonderful being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Les, you have the honor of playing Sherlock Holmes in the movie Sherlock Holmes, Mare of the Night. And I'm a huge Holmes aficionado, so we may take a deep dive into that. I am. But before we get there and completely geek out, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background as an actor?
Okay. When I got out of high school, I wanted nothing more than to go to New York City and become a stage actor. And actually toured around with a repertory theater company out of LA for about a year and a half, right out of high school. And I just kind of didn't feel like it was going to happen for me. I kind of chickened out and went back to school, got married, life happened, and I always stayed active in theater. But about the time that I saw that I was going to be able to retire, so there was a long time, distance of time there. About the time that it was looking like I was going to be able to retire, I thought, why don't I go back? I was teaching school, and my students were asking me about film, and everything I talked about was stage. And so I thought I would get involved in film. I did some extra work for some Hollywood productions that were filming in Austin. This was about 13 years ago, and fell in love with it. And ever since then, I've just continued to become more and more involved with it, and just loved film even more than theater. And I just think it's a great medium. I'm totally converted.
As I mentioned, you play Sherlock Holmes in this movie, and I have to start by asking, what is it like to play one of the most iconic fictional characters in all of English language? What burdens does that bring? What opportunities does that bring? How did that challenge you as an actor?
You know, the way CJ has put this together, most of the burdens were what he has gone through in his life to get to this point right here. We see Sherlock at a point toward the end of his life where he has become he's become a zombie. He is absolutely locked down in fear, and you remember his 4% solution that he shot up. That and smoking the opium, and something that has happened to him that has absolutely devastated him has created a zombie that gets up, survives, goes back to bed. And he is a living zombie. He's about ready to die. That is the way we see Sherlock. And I know a lot of people hate to think of Sherlock in that way, but that is where he is. Now, this is a story of redemption, and so he comes out of that. But to more fully answer your question, did a lot of work studying about England during that time, that age. Studied a lot about Sherlock, read a lot of Conan Doyle. But what we wanted to create was the real Sherlock, not the story that Conan Doyle created, but the real Sherlock that Conan Doyle simply wrote about. And that's what we really focused on.
I've gone through my own journey of recovery, so I have some knowledge of those matters. But when CJ told me the story, the first thing that struck me is a flesh and blood Sherlock. Not a fictional character, but a real man who is subject to the same things that all people go through, whether you call it PTSD or whether you call it depression or whether you call it something else, that he has seen and experienced some terrible things because of his work. Mm. And at some point it might catch up with you. And it sounded like to me, it caught up to him. And you were able to bring that out. I mentioned I'm a huge fan. I have another podcast network in legal and regulatory compliance. And in that podcast network, I am doing the full Sherlock Holmes oeuvre, but focused on legal and regulatory compliance. And believe me, it works. But It's just an excuse to reread all the short stories, all the novels, see most of the movies again, much to my wife's dismay. So I'm on the case book of Sherlock Holmes, which is the short stories published in the 20s. And in those stories, I see a Holmes that is coming to grips with a lot of the things CJ described, subtly, not nearly as directly as you guys did, but the drugs are going to catch up to you eventually. And I saw that in some of those stories as well. As an actor, what does it feel like to sort of step into that role, knowing some of the great actors that have preceded you? Do you feel like you stood on their shoulders, or did they give you insights that allowed you to go your own way?
I think that one of the things that I wanted to do, I am not an actor that looks at the way another actor portrays a character. I just don't do that. I feel like what you end up doing when you do that. Now, this is me. I know plenty of actors that want to look at what someone did and grow from what they did or learn from what they did. But I feel like I'm almost imitating them portraying a character. So what I try to do is find that character. And of course, CJ and I spent a great deal of time discussing Sherlock, discussing his foibles, discussing all the things that had brought him to this point. And I really wanted to get inside CJ's head as the author of the script, and so we did spend a great deal of time. I will also tell you that we had friends from the outside. Had a friend who works with individuals with substance abuse, and we would go through scenes in the movie, and he's actually one of the characters in the movie. I won't tell you who he is, but he's a counselor, and he was able to give insight as to which drug made sense being taken where based on what was happening before and what we see in the movie. So he tried to put some realism in there. But we tried to be as authentic as possible with that.
And that really leads me, I really want to explore the relationship you had with CJ. You mentioned sort of long conversations to try to get inside his head as the writer of the script. Could you maybe tell me how that worked for you?
Yeah. CJ and I have been working together for over 10 years. The first movie that we did was just a small bit role. It was his first movie, and he found me on Backstage, one of these websites that allow actors to find jobs that are available. He found me there and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming in and doing this movie?" And we started talking. When he followed that up with another movie, he asked me to join and have a bigger role. And so we began a relationship right then, talking back and forth, understanding each other. And I let him know what I needed as an actor, and he let me know what he needed as a director. And we found that we worked really well together, and he doesn't have to give me a great deal of directing on set. Once we're going, we've done enough preparation so that we know what is happening. But it's mostly going to be on the phone, but we also do get together. Our families have gotten together. We actually spent an evening, my wife and myself and he and his wife, we spent the night in a Sherlock escape room down in San Antonio as we were getting ready for this project, and spent a lot of time talking about that. And that was a great time. It was like a bed and breakfast that was in a Sherlock Holmes escape room. It was incredible. But we can talk. In fact, my wife will say, is that CJ? Okay, you've got 1 hour because we got to get out of here. So the communication is easy, and I really love the relationship that we have.
What was the rehearsal process like with your other actors? Lestrade, Watson, Mary Watson, for instance.
So what CJ, for the most part, allows the actor to come up with their own ideas and then marries it on set. So when you're going through it on set, he's taking a look and then he makes adjustments from there. I did spend a bit of time. We had an interesting relationship, and I don't want to go too much into it, but there's a new relationship that isn't in the that you don't find in the Conan Doyle books. And this particular character required some background work. And so we spent some time talking on the phone, going over some things, discussing background, discussing what happened here and there and how we got to the place where we are. And that was probably 5-6 hours at least going over the script. And I wish I could tell you more about that. You're going to have to come to the movie and see it. But there was a lot of work done on that character. The rest of it, we came together, and then he made adjustments as necessary.
Could you talk to us a little bit about the difference acting in a film and on stage?
Absolutely. You mentioned rehearsal, and I will tell you that there are some directors that want a great deal of rehearsal so that they know exactly what's going on. And you have some actors or some directors who will say exactly as CJ has said, let's go for it. Let's see what we got and we'll make adjustments. Let's see what's happening. And you would never have that on stage unless it's improvisation. On stage, you've got everything set in stone. You're rehearsing for 4 weeks. The director tells you when you're going to be off book on every single act. You have your tech rehearsal where all the lights are. They've got everything marked where you have to stop. I mean, it is very, very specific. And every actor is coming at it from a different approach, a different level. You've got some that are ready to go at the end of the first week, and you've got others that aren't ready to go until after the tech rehearsal. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking. On film, you're expected to be an adult. You get your lines learned. You have your character, you be ready to bring it, and whenever you show up, they get your makeup on, you go on set, and you know where you're going to be beginning, you've looked at your call sheet, and they say, okay, ready, and action, and you go. And I've had that happen on a number of occasions, and I love the fact that everybody has to be an adult. If you're not an adult, you're not going to last.
Speaking of adults, I had the opportunity to interview the makeup artist. And she was a young woman.
Yes.
And I thought she was one of the most incredible dynamic interviews I'd ever had. And I don't know where she's going, but that woman's going places. What was it like to work with someone like that?
She's a beautiful person. She is so active in so many areas, and she puts every hat on. Wherever she is, she just stands out, whatever it is. If it's on stage, a musical, or doing the makeup, she stands out. And she is, I guess that's the thing that I loved about her. I had no idea all the gifts that she had. I knew that she was wonderful with makeup. That's all I knew. And then all of a sudden, I start finding out all these other things that she does so well. She does not brag. She's all those things that you said, and she's so humble, and just, love her.
The film itself is set in Victorian England, and although filmed in the Texas Hill Country, the set had to be constructed to at least resemble Victorian England. What's it like? What sort of does that add to your role as an actor when you can have a true period piece where you have both the set director and the costume designer working on period appropriate clothing and sets?
Oh, that it makes it all so easy to follow when you're seeing the costuming and the sets, everything that you're seeing in the home that we do a lot of the filming in. It's very specific to that period. Obviously, there's a difference between England Victorian and the U.S. Victorian, but they did a great deal of research, and it does make it just brings you into it. You're living it. I mean, even when they call cut, you're still there. You're still in the midst of it, and it makes it so easy to just jump in and out as necessary.
We're going to finish up by me asking you why a movie aficionado should see this movie.
Okay. I would say, and we're talking about the Sherlock aficionados or another aficionado.
So it's going to start with movie aficionados, and I'm going to assume the Sherlockians amongst us are going to flock to this movie.
Okay. When we talk about movie aficionado, I think that what you're looking at is a movie that was put together with passion. And there was not a great deal. This was not resourced from a studio or from a millionaire. This was the love of the medium, and you have a great deal of talent that came together to put this together. And I think that an aficionado is going to love seeing a passion project that is quality. And I'm not going to tell you what our budget was on this, but I will bet that no one could guess what our budget was when you see this. We have all the elements of a really outstanding project. You have the acting, you have the writing. The man who scored this, Antonio Grandotti from Canada, incredible musician. And I think that it is very important to support independent projects. And I really want to encourage people who love movie, come out, see it, and you will be surprised.
Les, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me, and I can't wait for the premiere. I can't say next month.
Almost next month.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Tom, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I love watching your podcasts.